October, United Nations troops have seemingly sent the bulk of the communist forces fleeing in defeat toward the Manchurian border, 100 miles to the north. From west to east, U.S., British, and South Korean troops are pursuing the disintegrating communist forces. By 27 October, South Korean troops have reached the Manchurian border on the Yalu River near Chosan, and other UN forces have advanced against virtually no opposition. But on the same day, a sudden, unforeseen factor changes the entire course of the war. Chinese communist troops cross the Manchurian border and help the North Korean Reds drive back UN forces. Chinese communists fighting in Korea are estimated at 75,000, with another 500,000 across the border in Manchuria posing a more serious threat. By 8 November, UN forces have been driven back considerably. But on this date, another unforeseen event occurs. Chinese and North Korean communist troops suddenly break off contact with United Nations forces and fight only rear guard delaying actions as once again UN troops drive toward the Manchurian border. On 20 November, another United Nations unit reaches the Manchurian border. This time it is a United States unit, the first U.S. outfit to reach the border. As United Nations troops continue to advance in other areas, much depends on what the huge Chinese army will do next. The first sign of the growing threat from China. Captured in East Coast battles 50 miles from the Manchurian border, these troops belong to Chinese Red Army divisions in the combat zone. Chinese and North Korean captives are brought out of the hills to Wonsan and Hamhung. The Chinese are better clothed than their North Korean comrades. With their quilted uniforms, they wear tennis shoes wrapped in layers of burlap, making a kind of shoe pack. In contrast with the Chinese, the North Koreans are in rags at this stage of the war. The prisoners double time across the Wonsan airfield. They are being marched to landing craft, which will take them to Busan. Since the beginning of the war, the North Koreans have suffered 460,000 casualties, including the dead, wounded, and captured. 130,000 Red prisoners have been taken at this time. 2 women are in this group. Prisoners of the UN are treated in strict compliance with international law. Over 25,000 men have been wounded in Korea, but less than 2% of these men have died. Less than 2 men out of every 100 wounded. The main reason for this low death rate is the speed of treatment. This is a battalion aid station, first stop in a wounded man's swift journey through the echelons of medical aid. The average time spent at a battalion aid station is only 72 minutes. Many types of transportation are used in evacuation to the next echelon, the regimental collecting station. Specially equipped jeeps are used in rough terrain near the front. But if the roads are serviceable, ambulances may be used. Air evacuation is fastest of all and enables certain medical channels to be skipped. Behind the collecting stations are division clearing stations and mobile hospitals. Medical care takes manpower. It takes several men to carry a litter. Evacuation procedures are similar throughout the services. The Navy provides medical service for the Marines. The results of speed have been shown by a hospital at Busan. Out of 18,000 wounded brought in during the first 3 months of the war, only 40 men died. Field expedient. Wooden stands instead of tables speed the movement of litters and allow the aid men to work at hand level without bending over. There is nothing fancy about these hospitals. They are there to save lives. The death rate of wounded in World War I was 8%. In World War II, it was 4.5%. Korea's approximate 2% death rate is a milestone in military medicine. Many casualties are evacuated by air to Japan. In a parachute drop, such as the 4,000-man jump north of Pyongyang in October, the parachutists' own medics jump with them. They carry enough medical supplies to last until contact is made with friendly forces. But even before contact is made, the injured may be evacuated from the drop zone by air. Helicopters with specially constructed containers carry the wounded out. Many a man who could not have survived a jeep or ambulance ride over the rough roads of Korea owes his life to these evacuation planes. Japan is the next stop from the hospitals in Korea. Japan is only an hour and a half away from Korea by plane, but less than half of the incoming wounded remain here. The rest are moved on to the United States. Many men wounded at the front lines in Korea have found themselves back in the United States 3 days later. At Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, members of the American Ordnance Association meet for an annual exhibition put on by the U.S. Army Ordnance Department. They see both U.S. and foreign equipment. A Russian 122mm gun. A Russian 85mm anti-aircraft gun. A Russian 152mm howitzer. U.S. and foreign vehicles are also shown. A Russian T-34 tank turret from Korea. A U.S. M-26 tank, waterproofed and equipped with a snorkel breathing device for use in fording operations and landings. A new waterproof Jeep. Greater electrical capacity for radio equipment has been added to this Jeep. A new 6x6 2.5-ton truck is equipped with a snorkel breather and waterproofing. Next, the visitors watch demonstration firing. Recoilless rifles give the infantry artillery firepower. Comparison firing, 50 caliber machine gun. An aircraft machine gun. Other guns are demonstrated in separate and comparison firing. On 15 November, in the Sea of Japan off the coast of North Korea, Navy Task Force 77 was operating in support of ground action in the drive toward the Yalu River. Winter weather is closing in, and naval operations are hampered by high seas and extreme cold. The aircraft carrier Philippine Sea receives ammunition, mail, and other supplies hauled across open water in a cargo net. Such operations are difficult in rough weather. The first load is ammunition. It is quickly taken in and passed back into the carrier's magazine. At this time, Navy and Marine carrier planes were taking the fight into every corner of North Korea below the Manchurian border. Carriers were also in operation on the west coast of Korea. On both coasts, the Navy's task of mine sweeping was continuing. During the resupply operations, the Philippine Sea is hit by a snowstorm. Despite the weather, a tanker comes alongside and refueling gets underway. As refueling and the transfer of supplies continue, the seas get higher and higher, and the storm becomes a veritable blizzard. This is not an unusually heavy storm. It is typical winter weather in the northern Sea of Japan. The crew breaks out snow shovels on the carrier. Although air operations are halted during the height of the storm, flights from snow and ice-covered decks are becoming routine. The planes are covered to protect them from the storm. Combat maintenance of the Corsairs and Panther jets continues through the storm. The Navy reports the typical Korean temperatures in the northern area average 11 degrees above zero during November and 5 degrees below zero during December. A more familiar kind of winter combat starts on the carrier deck. This is a severe test for carrier planes. During World War II, most carriers were in the milder climate of the South Pacific. At Hagerstown, Maryland, the U.S. Air Force demonstrates its latest cargo plane. This is the Fairchild XC-120, a packed carrier plane with a detachable fuselage. Doors are designed like clamshells. Cargo capacity is 20,000 pounds. It carries 64 combat-equipped troops or 36 litter patients with 4 attendants. The pack has detachable wheels. 4 electric drum hoists raise and lower the pack from the carrier. A central control operates the release and locking mechanism, and the pack lowers to its own wheels. Then the hoist lines are detached. The 5-man crew of the carrier consists of pilot, co-pilot, radio operator, navigator, and engineer. When the pack is separated from the carrier, it is easily towed away. This pack can be used to house various types of shops, headquarters units, emergency hospitals, weather stations. It can also be converted into a tanker for carrying fuel. Ball socket connections lock the pack to the carrier. A rubber tubing seals pack to carrier by compressed air. On the carrier, the 4 ball socket locks operate simultaneously. The carrier is powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney engines with reversible pitch propellers. Maximum speed is 250 miles per hour. The ceiling is 25,000 feet. The landing gear consists of 4 retractable dual wheel units. It's electrically operated, and the main or rear wheels have brakes. This airplane opens a new field for aviation. The cargo pack is to aircraft what the trailer is to highway trucks. 20 September, almost 3 months after the North Korean communists launched their invasion, United Nations troops are in the first stages of their all-out drive toward North Korea. 5 days previously, they went from the defensive to the offensive, when U.S. Marines made an amphibious landing 150 miles behind the enemy lines at Incheon. The landing cut off the enemy from his supplies and caught him in a giant United Nations pincers. Air Force, Navy, and Marine planes give support to ground troops and cut off communist attempts to bring up reinforcements from the north and south. Exactly 3 months to the day after the city of Seoul fell to the communist invaders, UN forces recapture this South Korean capital. These are Marines and U.S. 7th Division troops advancing into Seoul under enemy fire. Street fighting rages throughout the city. The Reds have fortified many of the buildings, and Red tanks may appear around any corner. It had been hoped that Seoul might be recaptured with a minimum of destruction, but this is impossible, as the Reds stage a house-to-house fight. After a 5-day battle for Seoul, General MacArthur announces the city's recapture on 26 September. There is still fighting in the city, but the main communist garrison is now fleeing to the north. UN troops rest as they close another chapter of history. At the Ashiya Air Base in Japan during the battle for Seoul, the 187th Airborne Regiment arrives from the United States. Ammunition and other supplies are loaded on unit vehicles which will be flown to Korea. The paratroopers, 2,400 strong, board C-54 transports and C-119 flying boxcars for their flight to the combat zone. Kimpo Airfield is the destination. The paratroopers are rushed to staging areas as fast as they unload. The same C-54s fly wounded back to Japan. In its first 4 days of operation, the Kimpo airlift evacuated 313 wounded to Japan. Cargo and passenger planes are coming into Kimpo at a rate of 1 every 10 minutes. Typical cargo is this disassembled 280-ton bridge. These pontoon boats are part of the bridge, which was shipped entirely by air. The airfield is inspected by Air Force leaders past and present. In the group are General George C. Kenney, Commanding General, Air University, Lieutenant General George C. Stratemeyer, Commanding General, U.S. Far East Air Forces, and General Carl Spaatz, retired, former commander of the U.S. Air Force. In the background is a captured Yak fighter plane found in good condition. Now land-based at Kimpo are Marine carrier planes aiding in the tactical support of ground forces north of Seoul. This F-7F Tiger Cat night fighter proves especially valuable during this stage of the fighting north of Seoul. F-7Fs are equipped with radar and are very effective against convoys and troop concentrations at night and in bad weather. These Tiger Cats and Corsairs are being loaded with 5-inch rockets for a strike near Seoul.
October 1950. The USS Missouri steams off the coast of Korea. For the first time on an American battleship, the United Nations flag is hoisted. Admiral Allen Smith and Captain Irving Duke honor it and the cause of freedom for which it stands. Slowly, the Big Mo's massive 16 inchers swing into position, ready to lay down a barrage on enemy coastal concentrations and strongpoints. Inside the Big Mo, as each hour approaches, the projectiles, weighing more than a ton each, are brought up from the magazine on special elevators. And one by one are loaded into the breech. Trained and skilled as a team, the gun crew work with clockwork precision as they ready the guns and load bags of powder into the breech. An officer takes a last-minute reading on the target and everything is set. Gun covers off. The last seconds tick away. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire! Salvo after salvo pour into the enemy positions as the Missouri opens up with everything it's got, pounding the enemy shore batteries and installations. Reds fight back, their shells narrowly missing the ship. Big and small guns carry on a barrage, hitting supply lines, wiping out ammunition dumps, hammering a halt to the Red Army's aggression.
A tropical typhoon hits the U.S. Sakai Army base in Japan. With rain and wind ranging up to 110 miles per hour, it is the worst storm to hit Japan in 16 years. Corrugated metal roofing flies through the air like paper. Most of the tile, shingle, and corrugated metal roofs are damaged. The concrete structures withstand the storm well, although windows are broken and there is water damage. There are no military casualties from the storm since most of the troops remain indoors in the stronger buildings, safe from the falling trees and power lines. But among the Japanese in the storm's path, 135 are killed, over 1,000 injured, and over 200,000 made homeless. The heaviest military damage is suffered by wooden and tar paper buildings. These tropical storms are expected near the Sea of Japan at this time of the year. October 17 is a suspenseful day for the U.S. 1st Cavalrymen as they advance into the outskirts of Pyongyang, capital city of North Korea. The city is known to be heavily fortified, and it is expected that the Reds will make a death stand for their capital. It is reported that the Reds have 30,000 men defending Pyongyang. Another Red is added to the 75,000 captured so far. A vehicle burns beside the road. Ammunition explodes in the fire. The attack is led by tanks as the 1st Cavalry advances under fire toward the center of the city. The railroad guides them. Then, surprisingly, the enemy fire weakens as U.S. infantrymen reach the heart of the city. The Reds are withdrawing. Although there is occasional rear guard fire and sniper activity, the main Red force has begun to flee northward in disorganization. A company medic gives first aid to a cavalryman wounded in the street fighting. As the 1st Cavalrymen overrun the city, South Korean troops join them. The ROK forces met heavy resistance on the east side of town, but finally fought their way through after 6 hours. They are following the retreating enemy northward. An estimated Red force of 30,000 is now fleeing Pyongyang. South Koreans and 1st Cavalrymen join forces, decide their zones of action, and move on. In the eastern area of Pyongyang, near the Taedong River, the South Koreans encounter a pocket of enemy rear guard troops and pause to wipe them out. Only small arms fire is necessary, as the river is crossed by bridge and assault boats. As UN forces take over the city, the North Korean Communist government has vanished, presumably having fled north across the Manchurian border. The heavily fortified capital of Korean communism is now under the United Nations flag. As UN forces take the North Korean capital at Pyongyang, a new threat to the Reds gets underway at Kimpo Airfield. Paratroopers of the 187th Airborne Regiment plan to jump ahead of the Reds fleeing Pyongyang, cutting off their escape route to the border. The planes are C-47 transports and C-119 boxcars. There are over 4,000 men in this operation, which consists of 2 separate drops on 20 and 21 October. The destination is a point 33 miles north of Pyongyang, where the Reds are fleeing through the towns of Sukchon and Suncheon. And here they go. The paratroopers bail out in waves from a dozen planes at a time. On the ground, there is practically no opposition. The attack comes as a complete surprise. Watching the jump is General MacArthur, who flew here from Japan to observe this first airborne operation of the Korean War. Flying over the attack area in his Constellation, the United Nations commander stated, "This closes the trap on the enemy." Of particular interest in this drop is the parachuting of heavy equipment, vehicles and artillery. The equipment drop takes place 10 minutes after the personnel have landed. Most of the material lands without damage, and the paratroopers rush out to put it into action. Transportation found available on the scene is pressed into service. Although the big jump was delayed at the start by bad weather, it moves like clockwork once it gets underway. Casualties are few. Out of the 4,064 men who made the 2 jumps, only 90 men are listed as jump casualties. and most of these consist of broken legs and sprains. Evacuation is rapid. Specially equipped helicopters land to carry the wounded, and they are quickly on their way back to the hospitals. Shortly after the paratroopers take their positions, they are joined by tanks of the 1st Cavalry Division, which have pushed through from Pyongyang. As these forces join, the last remnants of the Red Army are compressed into an area only 50 miles from the Manchurian border. On 17 September at Busan Air Base, a transport plane arrives with the first big-name entertainer to visit the troops in Korea. Al Jolson, often billed as the world's greatest entertainer, is in the midst of his last road tour. A veteran of years in show business and months of entertaining troops in World War II, in Europe, Africa, India, and the South Pacific, Al Jolson disregarded his doctor's warning and at the age of 64 set out to entertain troops in hospitals and at the Korean battlefront. In front of the audience he liked best, Jolson gives one of his last performances. GI audience enjoys his act. Al entertained Korean War casualties in Japan before arriving in Korea, and already has used up much of the seemingly boundless energy which he put into every performance. It was impossible for Al Jolson not to give out with all his energy and all his heart. His gaiety and rhythm was infectious, and he knew it could bring joy to others. On 23 October, 6 days after he gave this performance, Al Jolson died from a heart attack in San Francisco. One of his last acts in Korea was to raise a United Nations flag. During the month covered by this combat bulletin, the United Nations drive into North Korea moved ahead with surprising rapidity. On 20 September, UN forces were fighting in the outskirts of Seoul, fanning south from the Incheon landing and breaking out of their old beachhead. By 5 October, Republic of Korea troops had crossed the 38th parallel and were 55 air miles beyond the imaginary border between North and South Korea. On the west, U.S. troops were meeting some resistance north of Seoul. United Nations forces, including U.S., British, and Australian troops, were regrouping in expectation of a full-scale drive across the parallel after the United Nations voted approval for General MacArthur to send his troops into North Korea. By 20 October, communist forces were staggering, throwing off their uniforms and surrendering at the rate of 2,400 daily. The day before, Pyongyang, North Korean capital, had been captured by UN troops. 2 hours after Pyongyang was declared secure, members of the 187th Airborne Regiment dropped from planes 33 miles above Pyongyang and about 75 miles from the Manchurian border. South Korean troops drove westward to link up with the paratroopers. On the east coast, South Korean troops had taken Wonsan with unexpectedly light resistance and were advancing far to the north. Disintegrating communist troops were attempting to flee to the Manchurian border. There was still fighting ahead, but at this time it appeared that the Korean War was, as General MacArthur phrased it, definitely coming to an end.
On 20 December, there are 2 fronts in Korea. Main concern at this time is the Hungnam beachhead, where evacuation has been in progress since 12 December. On the Western Front, UN forces have withdrawn to a general line near the 38th parallel. The enemy continues to mass strength here. 105,000 troops and 100,000 refugees are evacuated from the Hungnam beachhead to the Busan-Pohang area to the south, plus vast quantities of supplies and equipment. The Navy and Air Force lay down a curtain of steel until the last man is removed. In the west, there is a gradual strengthening of the battle line. As General Matthew B. Ridgway becomes the new commander in the field, the Chinese are preparing for an all-out attack on Seoul. It comes on New Year's Day. The Allies abandoned Seoul on 4 January. With the entire UN line pulling back, the Chinese suffer 10-to-1 casualties, but continue to push south with overwhelming odds. The Navy evacuates thousands at Incheon. On 9 January, the railroad center of Wonju falls. By this time, UN forces have withdrawn 60 miles south of the parallel. Here, a relatively stable situation is set up, although no definite line is drawn. From the 9th to the 20th of January, there are few gains by either side. The city of Wonju exchanges hands several times in bitter local engagements. Air action continues to harass Red concentrations. Both sides have paused to mass strength for the crucial battles impending. The perimeter of blood and steel about the port of Hungnam is shrinking fast. Hard pressed by an invading Chinese Communist army that swarms forward with reckless disregard for its casualties, the last of the United Nations troops carry out their orderly withdrawal from military positions that are no longer tenable. The delaying actions which have exacted such a high toll of the pursuers are finally drawing to a close. Most of these men who have stuck it out until the last hours before boarding the waiting ships are elements of the 3rd Division. Troops evacuated are being shipped to Pohang and Busan. A nitrate factory smokestack is blown up by an engineer demolition team to prevent its use as a landmark by the Reds to pinpoint vital targets in the beach area. Floating artillery holds back an enemy which will finally be allowed to take possession of the heap of rubble for which it has paid so dearly. Tons of demolition charges are lowered under the piers and pilings that line the harbor front. It will be a long time before the occupying enemy troops will be able to put these harbor facilities to any good use. Around the warehouses on the docks, engineers lay out a hose that is filled with TNT. Many lengths of the explosive hose are coupled together and laid close to the foundations of the buildings. In the UN's new scorched earth tactics, few buildings are left in which the Chinese Reds will be able to hide from observation or air attack. Primer cord is attached to the hose and paid out to the last safe position at the water's edge. The last remaining troops board landing craft that are armed with machine guns. Detonation devices left in the abandoned city are ticking off their last seconds. An ammunition dump goes up, thundering and crackling as it illuminates the sky with a spectacular display of fireworks. The docks are destroyed. remains of Hungnam are left to the enemy. A few miles north of Seoul, other UN troops are also pulling back in the face of overwhelming Chinese military manpower. The situation requires the entire 8th Army to be redeployed. Men and machines move back from positions which they had occupied before the vast Chinese hordes had swarmed across the Manchurian border and precipitated an entirely new war. As UN troops withdraw below the 38th parallel, it is estimated that a force of fully 100,000 Chinese are preparing to close in on Seoul. The new lines, which will be commanded by General Ridgway, are regrouping well to the south, where our troops can avoid the danger of entrapment. South Korean guerrilla troops act as the rear guard as they move along in the withdrawal. The once proud capital city of Seoul is soon to be occupied by the enemy. Its last remaining inhabitants are frightened, discouraged, and depressed during a Christmas season in which the words, "Peace on earth, goodwill toward men," become a mockery. The Far East Air Force Combat Cargo Command takes on a mission of mercy. At Kimpo Airfield near Incheon, a precious cargo is assembled for evacuation from battle-torn Korea. Nearly 1,000 Korean orphans and waifs of war are taken aboard C-54s for transfer to an island refuge off the South Korean coast. Aged 6 months to 11 years, these helpless victims of war were to have been settled at a model child welfare center in Seoul under the direction of Lieutenant Colonel R.L. Blaisdell, 5th Air Force chaplain. But with the fall of Seoul now imminent, they are hurried off by air to a sanctuary far from the scene of any future hostilities. With the help of Red Cross, YMCA, and mission officials, the youngsters were gathered up from many points in the war-torn nation. The tiny passengers, many of whom are suffering from starvation, whooping cough, tuberculosis, and other serious illnesses, are cared for with special tenderness by the airmen and nurses. Last-minute evacuation by air is necessary because a Korean ship, which was to have removed the children from Incheon, failed to make its appearance. On the southern outskirts of Seoul, United Nations troops pull back across the Han River. The South Korean government has already moved to Busan. The carefully planned withdrawal from Seoul is orderly and without unnecessary haste, as British and American units fight delaying rearguard actions within the burning city to delay the oncoming Reds, who during the last few days have been attacking with fanatic disregard for their own high losses. A section of a pontoon bridge is dismantled after the main body of troops have crossed in that area. Whatever is usable and readily transportable, the troops take with them. There will be other rivers and streams to cross. Demolition charges are prepared to blow up the portions of the bridge that are impractical to salvage. Explosives attached, the order is given to destroy the floating span. Incheon, the seaport for Seoul, is evacuated. After the fall of the South Korean capital on 4 January, Incheon once again sees her beaches crowded with soldiers. It is a scene which is reminiscent of the United Nations landing here last September. But this time, the situation is more grim. Incheon has been isolated by the Chinese advance through the abandoned city of Seoul, and the communist reoccupation of Incheon is expected within a few hours. Chief difficulty in carrying out the embarkation here is the unusually high tides, which have a 30-foot rise and fall, limiting the place and time at which landing craft can safely come in. When UN troops, spearheaded by the 1st U.S. Marines, landed here on 15 September, the approaching end of the Korean War was hailed. But then the Chinese intervened. to bring about what General MacArthur described as a totally new war. The final outcome of this new phase in Korea is still in doubt as UN soldiers retrace hard-won steps along the roads and sea lanes to Busan. Throughout the evacuation, the United States heavy cruiser Rochester stands by in case the Chinese should appear before they are expected. The evacuation is to be completed by midnight. As the landing craft pull away, the island of Wolmi stands in the background, patched with snow. When the Marines had made their landing last September, Wolmi Island was the beachhead for the first wave of assault boats. Now Wolmi is the last coastal landmark the troops see as they make their reluctant departure. Thousands of civilian refugees from the same area jammed the railroad station at Incheon, patiently waiting their turn for any kind of transportation which offers a chance for escape from the oncoming Red Terror. The civilians from this section of Korea that has been in UN hands for a number of months appear better clothed and fed than the refugees evacuated from Hungnam in the east. The patient and enduring populace prayerfully waits for a chance to ride on something, anything that moves. Compared to walking day and night over the icy ground, a freight car is luxury travel. The harbor area is equally crowded with fleeing civilians. These refugees are the families of the factory workers or the families of dock workers. Many refugees arrange for their own transportation. Fishing boats and freighters are pressed into service. The fare is 10,000 won, or about $30, for the 36-hour sea journey to Busan. Darkness comes. At first, there are only a few fires visible. Then, Incheon is destroyed in the face of the advancing enemy. As dawn breaks over the suburban town of Ascom, debris burns in the deserted streets. This is the site of a former arsenal. Abandoned locomotives have received a final going over from the air. Kimpo Airfield, 12 miles inland, lies in smoking ruin. Typical of Incheon's total devastation are the locks, which once protected its tidal basin. To the troops of communist China are left these remains of a Korean city. The great trek southward goes on by land as well as by sea. Up to the last, every bridge across the Han River is taxed to its capacity. A million civilians have already started southward from Seoul. But still, the stream of refugees continues, slowly making its way over frozen rivers and fields. A serious problem for UN authorities, these people must somehow be cared for in the already overcrowded southern refugee centers. Farther south, near Suwon, British Commonwealth forces of the 29th British Brigade moved to new defense positions in the course of the general redeployment of all United Nations forces. Units of this brigade were among the last to leave the rubble that had once been Korea's capital. On its way back, the convoy passes the rusting skeleton of a Russian tank, one of those knocked out during last year's UN offensive. North of Suwon, U.S. forces, supported by tank units, prepare to dig in to fight further delaying actions in support of the redeployment. By holding the Chinese forces at bay from a series of selected defense positions, the 8th Army's withdrawal from above Seoul is successfully completed with extraordinary order and precision. As Chinese and North Korean ground forces occupy the ruined land for which they are paying so dear a price, fighter bombers of the UN Air Force fly constant sorties to harass and impede their movements and to destroy their supplies. The merciless blasting is in line with our determined efforts to prevent the enemy from marshaling sufficient troops for a major push before the UN forces have time to consolidate their strength in their new positions. Enemy strength that was to have been pitted against the outnumbered UN troops disappears in flashes of flame and puffs of smoke. After identifying their targets, our planes swoop down like avenging shadows of death and destruction. Reports from North Korean prisoners indicate that the incessant air attacks are wreaking havoc with troop morale. The enemy is kept off balance and prevented from holding the tactical initiative.